Welcome to yet another edition of my UFT video series. I have been putting together a series on the subject of UFT Web recording and testing. It has been a good and challenging adventure so far. I may have several more videos to come before I move on to something else. In this video, I want to proceed on by demonstrating another test generated in this UFT script to test navigating through a web application called Browse Orders. It is another demo offering by SAP using the SAP UI5 technology. My focus will be more on enhancing and overcoming challenges that are presented by the combination of UFT and SAP. My assessment is that UFT is doing a good job with trying to keep up with SAP application design and enhancements. But you are the ones who have to be convinced that it is the right tool for SAP automation testing. So I hope I give you enough demonstrations to help with that. This SAP Browse Orders app is designed in such a way that it challenges UFT without the AI capability of UFT, which I think you saw in the previous menu test action. The original record and playback approach might fall short. My plan in this demo is to briefly cover a walk through the UFT code and test processes that I experienced testing the Browse Orders SAP UI5 application. And I also want to provide more overview of the UFT results reporting. So let's move on to the sanity test action of this new script. When we select the sanity option in this particular script, we go to the action 3 and execute that action. So let's take a look at that. And before we do that, let me go ahead and prepare for our test run. And so we want the word sanity in the run control. And so when that is processed, it will process the action 3. And let's take a look at action 3 now. Okay, we are pointing to action 3. You can tell that you're pointing to action 3 when you see this little blue or whatever color that is up underneath the action. Okay, and got the little comment in the front here to indicate it is the sanity test. Action 3, we have the same bit of information at the beginning. One thing is important. Line 6, the util set context. That is needed if you're going to have AI commands, and I do have them in here. We also can see that there are a couple of checkpoints that you've seen before, we've talked about before, and it can be useful. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't work, and you just comment it out or delete the line and move on. It's not a critical thing as far as I think at this point. You might see differently at some point. However, let's move on. All right, so we have another one of the pop-ups, and one of the pop-ups is just has a V associated with it. And so this AI find text block looks for the value of V on the page, and when it finds it, it is able to click it. And we see that happening. The original record either didn't record a statement for that, and so I had to add that. It had to cancel, but not anything for it, didn't recognize that pop-up. So that's an interesting thing to occur in the record process, and that's kind of a shortcoming. Maybe that's still because of the UI5 technology in UFT, may still be in its early stages and will be forgiving there. But I definitely had to employ the AI process there, as well as the one it's called the hamburger menu, which is the one to the right of that same page, right next to the one with the V designation. All right. And so we got the initial process going. And of course, the sanity test is just about, hey, I'm going to click here, click there, make sure things are operational. That's the main focus of that. And so we also check the search button and put in a value to see to it that it was processing the searching. And let's see what else we have that I could share. Okay, yeah, here filter group. The select with the number, that because of that list, that UI5 type list, you're able to use selection values, and that can be good in the long run. So that's part of the recording, and it uses an SAP UI list. So that's good. Of course, the button for the closing of that. And what else do we have? Well, that's it. That's the extent of the sanity test. Usually a sanity test is not a very long one. It's intended to make sure certain things are operational, the important things regarding a particular application. Okay, so we are ready to go ahead and run this one. We don't have to belabor on that. I don't think there's anything else that, I did mention that, what was it, created by Object Spy to edit search. The search process also, I had to deal with that, but I had to do it separately. And it uses a web element. That one comes up. That's not an SAP UI5. That's a, typically you can get that through the Object Spy, but sometimes you'll also get it in a recorded process, and I think you'll see that in one of the subsequent actions. You'll see quite a bit of use of the web element, and that one usually works pretty good when it's made use of. I usually don't have to replace it once in a while, but I usually don't have to replace it with an AI utility type statement. Okay, let's go ahead and save this. Changes. Now we're ready to go ahead and execute this and see what the sanity test does and what it tells us. We're getting there. There's one of the pop-ups. That's the second one. Just want to know that, hey, it's there, it's responding. We can see an order. We can search. And we're done. Results are here. You can see the checkbox. All is well. We'll take a quick look at that and then move on. One more second. Okay, I think we can go ahead and partially minimize that. Click on the results and expand the output. There we are. We can see the checkpoints. They're working fine. That one is one of the ones that looks for the load time and number of images and links. Well, you can see there wasn't much there. And then the other checkpoint is an accessibility checkpoint. Nothing there. Let's go back to the summary. I wanted to check on the timing. Ended. That's not, I think it's, yeah, that one. 46 seconds, so under a minute to do that sanity check. That's good for a sanity check timing. Less than a minute. Shouldn't take very long to step through a few items and come back and tell you that everything is okay. Looks like the application is operational and we're ready to go. We're ready to move on to the next one. And let's do that. Okay. Expand this again. We're in the IDE once again, and we want to move to action 4, which will be the search process. And that one may be a little bit longer than you might think. Well, let's see. Going to click on action 3. Oh, it's there. Okay. 27 lines. That's not too bad. Okay, let's step through this as quickly as we can without, I don't want to rob you of good information, useful information. Here we go with, looks like we did have to do something about, again, that V, the first menu pop-up, and then the search, as well as the hamburger menu. We had to use the find text block, or the AI util statements had to be integrated into the SAP UI5. Let's see if we do have anything left. Yeah, we have the web element, we have the web edit to set the search. We just didn't have the search itself until we used the AI util statements. Then we were able to process. And we used that set to clear, and then we were able to click and reset the output or display, if you will. And I put a weight in so you could see when you did the select one, I think it went over to show you a window for the order. And what else? We closed that and came back to the main display. And that's basically it. So the search is not that involved, but we did test it adequately. All right, now let's go ahead and we don't have anything to save, no changes. Oh, yes, we do. If we run right now, we'll get the sanity test again, not the search test. So we have to come in here and type in search, hit the enter key, scroll back up. Okay, now we can save, and we're ready to run the test. And I don't want to forget to remind you of, okay, how long did the search test take? That should be my first thing when we get to the output. But in the meantime, we're preparing to go and interact with the application momentarily. Here we go. We're focusing on the search this time. I'm still concerned about the delays that occur when it interacts with the application. I believe it's the agent, but okay, there it is. It did do the search for a round, and then we see the 2 orders associated with it. Now it's doing Tortuga, and we see 2 orders for that, and now we're back to the cleared state and normal state of display. And it should start to wrap up. Give the output a few seconds. Looks like we got a good return code. It's not going to fool me. I'm waiting for it to switch. And there it goes. Okay, now that we're here in the IDE, I will partially minimize and click on the output, results viewer, and here we are. You see I do have one of those executions to make sure that the display remains at the top so we don't lose any of the output, or actually the identification of certain objects. And what else? There's a count check. We see it says there were 2 orders after we did that search, and it was actually for both Tortuga and the other one around. And let's see what else we have down here. A count check, and we see 10. That's back at the front. I thought I'd put in those kinds of checks. The search check says search test reset completed. We were able to get back to the normal display. And then finally the action check says that we completed the search test. Okay, now I'm going to take a once over just to see if there's anything else we need to share with you. Search check, search test for a round completed. Nice little test, not overbearing, plenty enough information. Okay, we're done with that. We're ready to move on to the big one, I believe it is. This was action 4. Am I correct? And let's expand this. Well, we're back in action 1. Action, let's see. Yeah, the search test was action 4, and for some reason it wasn't still displaying. Okay, and now we're ready to go to action 5. Now, action 5, that one you can see here is up to 136 lines of code. So it's the big one. Now, granted, I do have several functions that I'm introducing to this particular action. So we have starting at line 91. So the script is actually 89 lines roughly of code, where after that we have a function called parse ordered. We have another function called parse price. We have another called remove extra spaces, and locate anchor, and locate element. So all of these functions were added to this particular application or action. And let's scroll to the top here. So this is the order test. The idea of this test is to go through, navigate, select a particular order, display that order, look at the information about that has to do with the order, more detail, the line items, and also looking at some additional CRM data as well. You'll see all of that momentarily when we do the test. Now, I must admit to you that the original recording is far from what this script is now. So, once again, I want to use this moment to remind any of you that might be listening that think that record and playback is test automation. it is the start of test automation. It is what I would consider level 0 of test automation. But you want to move in the direction of building a test framework, test scripts that can manage and run for some significant length of time without maintenance. You want to be able to have scripts that work, that accomplish what the goals are for that script without too many changes or changes causing it to just fail. So record and playback is nice, but the reality is many times, because of the complex technologies we're dealing with in the web environment especially, you have to be ready to put in some code, utilize this AI technology even now in UFT, and it's a blessing, in order to be able to have scripts that work in a more enhanced manner. All right, let's take a closer look at this. I have a couple of variables I defined with the dim here, RD and RC. I'm using those throughout the script. And you can see AI integrated throughout. I've got the set context up here, but we were able to start out sticking with the original recording at this point. Then when we started to actually deal with the ordering, then we had to switch on over to other particular statements that are from the AI offerings. You can notice here we're using a fine text. We saw a fine text block, and there are some others as well. But also notice that in this fine text, at least these first three, we have a mic any text and mic from top, and this one is mic with anchor on left. And then this one uses an anchor value, while the other two uses a positional value to indicate how many in whatever direction. So how many from the top, 10 from the top. So these are ways of finding certain text links on a page. That's what they're about. And they help you tremendously. They can be a big help. And especially this one. And you'll see there are some other options that you can specify, like mic with anchor on right, mic with anchor above, mic with anchor below, and the mic from top and mic from bottom, and I think there's a mic from left and a mic from right. So those are additional options, properties that you can apply to the fine text process or method. And so definitely look that up at the ADM Help UFT Web site to get more understanding about those. I'm not going to give you a lesson on those, but they are useful and valuable. I had to put in a little loop process to actually find out what was at these particular locations using the positional. So you can do that, write a little loop, have it go through and provide you with a list of outputs that tell you what are at those locations and what happens when you do this. And so what you're telling this one, I'm saying, all right, go look and find this ordered colon, and that's like the label for that particular display, and use this as the anchor on the left. But what we really want is to get the text for the one on the right. if that makes sense to you. Okay? So there's more you can do with that. And here you can see I was setting up, I initialized RC and then used RD to be a repository for this first function, remove extra spaces. So in the output, as a matter of fact, it was the output for this statement right here. It picked up this value, but what it really does, even though it's saying, hey, the anchor is this, but I want the value on the right, it still gives you the ordered text as well. So that starts out the statement, but then it gives you a date and time, a date stamp, as well as what's to the right of that is the price amount that appears on the page. So it gets you all of that. So what I had to do is say, okay, it puts additional spaces instead of just having one blank space in between each piece of information. It had one place where it had like, I think as many as 4 spaces, and that causes a problem with trying to parse through that. So I had to write a function that I call remove extra spaces to get rid of the extra spaces and just allow one space between each text value. So since it picks up multiple information there, then I did that. So now I have it ready to go into this other function called parse ordered and parse price. One gets the ordered information, which is just going to be the label ordered, followed by the value, which is the order date for that particular order. And then this one would pick up from there, which is the last value that's inside that RD value, is the price along with the currency type. So that I could pick up and display it as invoice amount, while the other piece, the first piece of information, I can display it as the order date. I could not find a UFT statement, AI or otherwise, that could separate the two. They were close enough together that it just looked at it as one piece of data. And so that made it hard to actually record that process, but I was able to come up with the magic of functions to get this information. And it was supposed to pick up a piece of this using this particular web element it defined, but it was not working well. So I removed it. Also, you'll notice that some of the AI statements will put the actual values in for detection. Well, that's fine as long as you are going to process that same order over and over and over again. But I wanted this script to be able to change that value. As a matter of fact, if I go back, is it back up here? Yes. Right here on lines 10 and 11, I have 2 different orders. Excuse me. The original order was for that 7918, I believe it is, and that was 2. But then I wanted to look at the last order, the one that was not on the screen. It was all the way on the bottom of the page, and I wanted to make sure that it could process as well. And I'll mention a couple more things about that. And let's see, go back down where I was here. So we had these functions. So 3 functions were necessary in order to make this piece work properly, where we could display the order date and the price or invoice amount, as I called it. So I moved on. I kept that commented. I only kept it to mention to you to be aware that some of these will give you problems. At first, I was able to test, and it would do what's called a smart identification and change that, but it seemed like it just stopped working. Don't know why, but I couldn't get it to work with other orders. So I had to scrap it and do something like what I just showed you. All right, so let's move on. We do have some other of these values. I decided to keep them in the output, but basically you want to use one or the other. So I think what I did was I said, I put a statement here, data object tests using SAPUI5. But before that, I believe I have a statement that says, where is it, if I can find that? Yeah, right here. AI tests, data object tests using AI. So the next few uses AI, and then after this comment, using SAPUI5, now I'm using some that were a part of the original process, but then I had to switch a couple of them, I think. But anyhow, I created yet another function, and we'll talk about it in more detail, but I called it and passed the original values to it so that this is the input, what's defined in the object repository, and the actual hard-coded value on the page. And so that is what I wanted it to go out and display that, in the output report. Same thing with the shipping date, the invoice amount, and something of the line item. So we could see all of those values. And that little routine was nice to be able to do all of those. I have another one similar to that one. All right, then we switch to the processor display. So initially, it displays data from the customer side, and then it displays data from the vendor side, which it calls the processor information. And so we switched over to it, and again, there's the select. So that image was the second one, and I was able to use the SAP UI, it's a UI5 tab strip for that. That was recorded, not a problem. We were able to keep that. But then here I called locate element again to pass it yet another set of combination for a particular object on the screen that I was calling sales contact. And let's see. Yeah, then we have the slide bar movement. Now here's another AI statement that can be used, and it's just AI util.scroll, and you tell it which way to go, up, down, left, right, and you give it a number. It's usually like number of bits, I believe, not bits, pixels, and it will take it whatever direction you say. And it worked fine as well. I just put it into a loop so it would do multiple, since I don't know how many it should and where it is at the time. But my expectation is once it got to doing this locate anchor, instead of locate element, this one is locate anchor. Slightly different. You'll see the difference when I talk about that. And it is able to go and find that, just like that other one I was showed you earlier, where it treat this like a label that's on the left, and I want you to get the data that's on the right, and we'll call it sales contact dash AI to say that we got it with an AI statement. Okay, whereas we got this one with an object SPI statement. Okay, then let's see, we close the block to go back to the original display window for the application. And again, we have to I used the old approach, up triangle, another AI, double clicking to make it go up faster, to make sure that when we got to this checkpoint and sync, that we were okay, we wouldn't have an error trying to get to the end of the test. And then finally the action check to say that the test was completed. So let's take a quick look at the functions. The parse ordered, basically we're looking to get the information for the order date, followed by the date. And this was the code to do that. I did a split, which causes a table to be created, looking at blanks. So anywhere there's a blank, then it parses out a piece of the text and puts it into a separate column in the array. And then I could go and look and process the array and get that data out, send it back to the originating call to this function. Then the parse price is similar, using somewhat of the same code, but down here it's actually saying, hey, just pull the information which is that amount and currency value, pull it right out of that last column or row. I forget which one it is. It's an array. And then send that back to the calling statement for the function. Then the remove extra spaces, which is the first one that occurs, just takes that value that's sent to it and goes through and makes sure that there's only one blank between each piece of text. That's what I needed in order for the other two functions to work properly. Otherwise, they would not. All right, then the locate anchor and the locate element. I use the locate element more, and it's just taken a couple of those statements that will hard code it, and now I could use in text and out text to both get the data in and send the data out to communicate that I was able to get the inner text data and I'm able to report on it. Same thing with the locate anchor, a little differently, where we're dealing with that on the left, treating the anchor as the label on the left and then picking up the data on the right, which unfortunately many times some of the data can be too close together and they end up all being brought in to one one display. All right, and that's the reason for some of these functions that I have. And that covers that. Now, granted, as I said, I want you to know that it took me about 3 days to get this particular action working. The other ones were fairly straightforward, but there was a lot of information here, a lot of issues that came up, which indicates that the SAP UI5 is a challenge with some applications. May not be with all. You may end up working with some applications that are pretty straightforward, pretty simple to work with. But this one was working with displaying data, capturing that data, not entering data. And so they may have put more time into the opposite, the input of data more than the output of data. And so I see it here in this particular script. But we got it to where it's working, and let's go ahead and see if we get another good execution of this output. We want to make sure we change the value here to order. That's ready. Save all. And let's execute. Now this one could take a little bit longer. I believe the last time I was around 3 minutes of execution time. Well, I want to say while we're waiting, I'm glad I was able to get through this a little quicker than I thought. And I hope that you were able to see some things that are useful for you going forward. Okay, we're starting to interact with the application. And we're going to set up to actually go after, I believe it's going to be that last one, yes, order 828. And so the design of this is you should be able to run with selecting any one of these orders, and you just do it by the selection number. That's the 10th one. We can reference either 1 through 10. I started to also put that as a variable in the table, the data table, and that can be done. That's a simple thing to do. So we're looking at the initial data that's more related to the customer itself, and then we'll see information that's related to the vendor. And so what we're doing right now, the reason it's taking a little while, is it's going through and pulling information from these various objects that you see on the screen. The price, the order date, the shipping date, the customer name, line items, the order number. We've switched over to the processor information now. We want to get the name, Stephen Buchanan in this case. We could have picked up some additional information. That's easy enough to do. There's the line items and the code to push it back to the top. Now we're going back to the normal display, and again we're pushing the bar up to the top. Why that agent isn't doing that, I'm not sure. And we're done. And you'll notice it's not showing the check mark, it's showing an exclamation, which means warnings. And let's talk about that pretty quickly here. Let me wait a minute, give it a chance to go through finish its cycle of close out. Getting back to the IDE, so now we should be able to partially minimize that, and let's select this, expand the results output. As I said, you see the exclamation, even though you see plenty check marks indicating that it found the order name, 828, customer name, around the horn price. Notice how the label is a part of the value. That's maybe could be kind of a thing with the UI5 technology. The shipping date, order date, that's one I had to parse. The invoice amount, that one I had to parse. And let's see, what do we have now? Now, we see that it tries to reconcile finding this particular it was defined during the recording, this object with this name, but it tells you that it was having a mismatch problem. So it couldn't quite find that. Now, but then what steps in is what's called smart identification, a part of UFT. I'm thankful for that. And it's able to go through, and let me show you. It says this is the original description. There was a mixed class property, an inner text property that had the value, the HTML tag property, and it said smart identification alternative description, and it says, well, there is a MIC class, HTML tag, says, but I used the HTML tag, that was good, but the other things I ignored, like this guy here, the width, the inner text, the visible equal 1, yeah, meaning yes, it's visible. He ignored that, and the act name property. So all of these it ignored, but it was able to match on HTML ID, which it probably should have been able to match on inner text, but it did not. Okay, moving along, the other ones are similar. There's another mismatch, and these are the original code that came from SAPUI5 recording. Another mismatch. So, but I was able to replace those with AI, and that was a saving thing for me. The line items seem to work okay. Lets us know there's 5 line items for that particular order. And there's where I use the scroll. And I probably don't have to use it that many times, but I want to make sure I had sufficient. I didn't want to take a chance, and so I've left it that way. The double check, same way. And let's see, anything else on the action lets us know it completed successfully. All right, let's see, I'll take one more pass here. Want to make sure okay, let me go back up to the summary. You can see, yeah, just under 3 minutes test time. That's pretty good for that size and for the amount of work that I had to put into that. It definitely turned out pretty good, in my opinion. Okay, I think we're at the end of this, and I'm thankful that we're able to get through this in decent time. Thank you for your time. So check out my follow-up demo videos that demonstrate using UFT for recording and testing web applications. The videos should be entitled something like UFT Web Recording and Testing.